Reports from the NBA Nation are coming out that Irving and the Nets are engaged in aggressive negotiations for the new contract. Kyrie Irving has already requested and received permission from the Brooklyn Nets to find sign-and-trade offers from other organizations. And rumor has it that the Lakers and the Knicks are among the 5 potential destinations for the Nets' all-star point guard. Here's the inside information. Let's start with the risk versus reward. Professional sports is filled with peculiar stars, and honestly, Kyrie Irving is at the top of the heap when it comes to being eccentric. As it's normal for professional athletes to carry some sort of baggage, if their performance outweighs the trouble, even the most unconventional athletes can find a fabulous paycheck. In Kyrie Irving's case, many fans and experts believe that Kyrie Irving might genuinely be the most complicated trade candidate in NBA history. His case is more than formulaic risk versus reward because he's in the running to receive the award for most unpredictable player in the NBA. Although he is sworn to stay with every team, reality shows that it was just a sojourn. Then Irving sallies forth to the next contract. He pledged to renew his contract with Boston, but we all saw him tally-ho to Brooklyn. So the question is posed, how confident would any team be of trusting Irving to keep his word? Experts suggest that trading for Irving would require complete organizational buy-in. You'd have to do it with the understanding that he's going to miss games due to injury, and he's going to miss games for reasons other than injury as well. He's going to say bizarre things, and he's probably going to drive the coach crazy. But on the other hand, an entire franchise will reap the rewards. You can count on Irving to make the biggest shots of a season. Irving is the rare player whose dysfunction is tolerable, justified by his tremendous performance, and that makes finding a reasonable trade even more difficult. If the Nets trade Irving, their efficiency will decrease. Other experts claim that a trade would pretty much take the Nets out of championship contention. However, given the risk Irving poses, there's not many teams willing to give the Nets their fair value back in a deal. A win-win situation for both parties involved could be far-fetched. Since this is the case, perhaps the Brooklyn Nets should just opt to keep Irving. He has a $36 million player option and fairly limited leverage to force a trade with it. The only teams with enough cap space to realistically pursue him in free agency are so far out of the championship picture that Irving would have to be forced to ever play with them. As for the Indiana Pacers, it's already clear that they will not be signing Kyrie Irving this offseason. Another indicator that he'll probably just stay with the Nets. He can't strong-arm his way to his preferred team, and they can't trade him for their preferred package, simply because his value is somewhat decreased. The Athletic Shams Charania published the main pointers of a contract with Irving to prevent standoff that would lead to disaster. Shams Charania explained that a deal with Irving must meet all or most of the following conditions in order for the risk factors to decrease, and both parties share a mutually beneficial contract. Number 1. The team must be a destination that Irving actually feels enthusiastic about. If he's not happy, he'll only spread that to his teammates, throwing off their harmony. Number 2. The returning package must at least keep the Nets vaguely competitive. This isn't a rebuilding trade, and the Nets need to make sure that they don't turn away from Kevin Durant. Number 3. The Nets cannot sensibly accept any 2022 free agents back in a sign-and-trade because it would prompt a hard cap that they are almost certain to exceed. With those parameters in mind, here are the 5 teams that make the most sense for Irving. Phoenix Suns. Yes, it's probably fair to say this matchup is in the realm of speculation, but the NBA has seen plenty of miraculous episodes. Although Phoenix doesn't have any main points of attraction for Irving, Phoenix does have a 37-year-old point guard barreling towards the end of his career. Chris Paul was a fringe MVP candidate during the regular season. The first 8 games of his postseason were incredible, with 22.6 points, 9.9 assists, and 58% shooting. And then, everything fell apart against Dallas. Some chalk it up to an injury, others blame it on the team's invasive reaction to COVID-19 outbreak, while most just say he's getting old and his time in the NBA is nearing its end. Whatever it might be, the Suns caught a glimpse of their future, and it does look a bit dismal. Irving might be their one and only chance to swap out Paul for a younger star point guard. And even if DeAndre Ayton leaves, the Suns with Irving seems promising for Phoenix. As for the Nets, however, they would essentially be trading one set of risks for another. Paul is a supreme professional without a doubt, but at his age, there's just never going to be a guarantee of his health. He would be a magnificent fit with Durant, who can honestly play well with just about anyone. And although Simmons is kind of a ball hog, he'd still be suitable for Paul considering his efficient shooting. But remember, Paul is beloved in Phoenix. Paul is so important to Phoenix's culture that he's almost certainly not going to be on the table. The fans of Phoenix have grown too sentimental. so this team still remains a speculation only. Miami Heat. When Irving asked the Cavaliers for a trade in 2018, he purportedly had 4 teams on his wish list: the Knicks, the Spurs, the Timberwolves, and the Heat. We'll soon discuss the Knicks. The Spurs and Timberwolves are out of contention, but there's something about Miami. Will Irving get his wish and head to South Beach? Well, the Heat are one of the few teams that have the biggest capacity for a trade with the Nets. The Mavericks and Knicks are the other teams, but they're currently preoccupied in a bidding war for guard Jalen Brunson. Therefore, the Heat appear to be in a great spot for Irving's services if they want to acquire him. But how much would they be willing to give up in a potential deal? Anthony Chiang of the Miami Herald reported that Miami's prospect of interest in Irving depends on his price in the trade market. Miami isn't willing to give up its top trade assets for the star point guard. As for those Miami top trade assets, that would be Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Tyler Herro, who can be placed in that group of assets to covet. But Kyle Lowry would certainly be on the move. New York Knicks. The Knicks are in a position with greater leverage in the case of acquiring Irving. They could conceivably offload enough of their mid-tier salaries to the cap space teams to sign Irving outright as a free agent. They just might have the influence to convince the Nets to cooperate on a more palatable deal. This angle is necessary because, honestly, their own assets aren't very alluring. It seems that Evan Fournier, Kemba Walker, and Nerlens Noel won't be teaming up with Irving unless they're attached to a bundle of draft picks. Perhaps the Nets could flip those picks somewhere else, but fundamentally, this deal won't be very beneficial for Brooklyn. And unfortunately, New York isn't so keen to the idea of adding Irving to the roster. First of all, the apple of the Knicks' eye is Jalen Brunson. Secondly, they view Irving as a big gamble with lots of risks. The Daily News recently reported that New York is currently unwilling to give Irving a long-term contract extension with significant financial guarantees because they do not believe Irving is committed to doing what it takes to be on the floor every game for his teammates. Los Angeles Clippers. If they were to just make the switch, Paul George for Kyrie Irving, the Clippers and the Nets could get a deal done right now. By offering their second star Paul George, Brooklyn would be satisfied and getting that perimeter defense they need, allowing Simmons to play point guard full-time. The benefit for the Clippers is having the best point guard on a team with a nearly endless supply of wings. The Clippers have spent years accumulating those wings for a reason. They have a very clear roster-building philosophy. But would they be willing to trade George for Irving? Experts claim the swap wouldn't be smart at the cost of losing George. But just recently, despite being mentioned in nearly every report related to Kyrie Irving, the LA Clippers gave statements saying they don't have interest in trading their star point guard. It turns out that the Los Angeles Lakers are currently the only team with legitimate interest in a trade for Irving. Los Angeles Lakers. ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski reported that the Los Angeles Lakers are the only team to have expressed interest in acquiring Irving via a sign-and-trade deal. But the Nets are not going to be interested in Russell Westbrook. Durant unintentionally hinted through social media that he didn't want to keep playing with Westbrook after leaving Oklahoma City. So whatever they do, they shouldn't alienate Durant. But things change at the speed of a heartbeat, and now it appears that the Lakers will not be reuniting with LeBron James and Kyrie Irving this offseason, as the latter is opting into his deal with the Nets and looks set to remain in Brooklyn. So much for that short-lived scenario, but millions of fans got a tingle of joy hoping that a LeBron and Irving reunion was plausible. On the 28th of June, Irving took to social media informing the world, "Normal people keep the world going, but those who dare to be different lead us into tomorrow. I've made my decision to opt in. See you in the fall. A11 even." That's not the official announcement, but it's going to be set in stone soon enough. Ultimately, taking a $30 million pay cut just wasn't something Irving was willing to do to shift from one coast to the other and team up with the king of basketball, LeBron James.